The UFC comes with its fair share of chaos and bloodshed, but would you believe us if we say that the industry has a lot more going on than just that? Well, we do happen to see a lot of people winning games and showing the world their true potential. There are also a lot of athletes who have had some super weird careers. Let's take a look at the top 10 weirdest careers in UFC history, starting with Jesse Taylor at number 10. The story of Jesse Taylor has all the elements of a tragedy. Still, the circumstances of his time in the UFC were peculiar. In Season 7 of The Ultimate Fighter, the middleweight competitor competed and won every fight, but after an instance of public drunkenness, he was dismissed from the program. Later that day, he suffered a one-off defeat at the hands of CB Dollaway, and the promotion cut ties with him. After that, he spent the following decade traveling around the area's major landmarks and performing for audiences there. In 2017, he competed in Season 25 of The Ultimate Fighter, remained unbeaten once again, and ultimately took home the trophy. But USADA busted him a few weeks after the concert, and he was freed again. At number 9, Michael Johnson. As a person, Michael Johnson presents as mysterious. His professional career paints a picture of a boxer who is unstable and probably not very good at what he does. But that's not even close to being true. During his time on The Menace, he was a formidable opponent. He has an impressive UFC record, having won bouts over many notable opponents, including Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson, Edson Barboza, and Joe Lauzon. But he's also been knocked out by some relatively unknown but very capable opponents, like Jonathan Brookins, Reza Medadi, and others. Coming in at number 8, Greg Hardy. Ex-NFL player Greg Hardy has one of the most novel and unusual occupations. Because of his high profile and impressive athleticism, the UFC signed him with high hopes for his future success in the heavyweight class. But instead, spectators saw one of the most outlandish UFC experiments in history. His first bout with the organization ended in a disqualification defeat. After 3 bouts, his victory with Ben Sassali was reversed because he used an inhaler in the middle of the bout. That doesn't even include the oddball battles he had on short notice with Alexander Volkov and the struggle he had with Yorgan De Castro. Right now, though, he's rather busy. Greg Hardy, a former defensive end for the NFL and current heavyweight in the UFC, has agreed to compete in bare-knuckle boxing. On Wednesday, it was reported that Hardy, 33, has signed a multi-fight contract with Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. After 3 years with the UFC, Hardy is making his first move in the combat sports industry. Hardy said, "I'm back and ready to knock everyone out in the worst promotion there is," Hardy stated. "Everyone knows I can knock people out, and that's what I'm planning on doing. I can't wait to take the gloves off and rumble for BKFC." After a string of off-field incidents, including an arrest for domestic abuse, the NFL banned Hardy in 2015. Hardy's career in the UFC, during which he competed out of the American top team in Florida, was marked by both triumphs and setbacks. Moving on to number 7, BJ Penn. Being one of the best fighters of all time, BJ Penn's unusual professional path was eventually accepted as the standard. Although he is widely considered the finest lightweight of all time, his career with the organization ended on a 7-fight losing skid. His late career slump was likely due to a combination of old age and physical deterioration, plus an abnormal amount of weight-related gyrations. In 2005, he fought at heavyweight and lost to Lyoto Machida, followed by number 6, Caleb Starnes. After appearing in Season 3 of The Ultimate Fighter, Caleb Starnes received a reasonable amount of attention. 2 of his next 3 bouts in the cage were defeats to Yushin Okami and Alan Belcher, and he soon blew the momentum he had built up. This post was motivated by his last fight in the UFC, which took place against Nate Quarry. While competing against his opponent at UFC 83, Starnes spent most of his time dodging and evading. After only landing 12 punches in 15 minutes, fans dubbed him the Running Man, and he was eventually removed from the promotion. Up next is number 5, Mikey Burnett. For the UFC, Mikey Burnett represented one of the biggest what-if scenarios of the late 1990s. The first UFC welterweight championship bout was between him and Pat Militek, and many observers believed he came out on top. But he was defeated by a split decision, and after gaining one more UFC victory, decided to retire while still at the top of his game. In Season 4 of The Ultimate Fighter, he finally received the call after waiting for 7 years. He agreed to appear on the program, but his appearance was poorly received. It is said that Burnett cracked his neck during a training session. However, others say he did it while attempting to sprint through a wall. Since his first-round defeat at the hands of Din Thomas, he has never returned to the ring. There has been a lot more disarray in his life recently. An armed robbery gone wrong in Tulsa, Oklahoma on February 29, 2016, left UFC veteran and star of The Ultimate Fighter, The Comeback, Mikey Burnett, with several gunshot wounds. Burnett, who competed in the UFC 3 times in the late 1990s, was shot 4 times in the abdomen. Freddie Burnett, Burnett's son, was also shot during the assault. The shot missed Burnett and his kid. Several years ago, the Tulsa World reported that 17-year-old Harold Thompson was given a 35-year jail term after pleading guilty to 2 charges of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon and attempted robbery with a pistol. Despite being labeled a youth offender, Thompson was given a hefty term. Coming in at number 4, Brian Bowles. UFC newcomer Brian Bowles is now off to a winning start, but he too has had a weird journey so far. In their rematch, the former WEC bantamweight champion defeated Demetrio Page through submission at 3:30 of the first round, thanks to a guillotine choke. Exactly 3 years ago, they had the same outcome in their first fight. After that, Bowles lost his championship eliminator fight with Uriah Faber in 2011, missing out on a shot at UFC Gold by a hair. His next bout was a loss against George Roop, and it was the final one ever held under that banner. In spite of his status as one of the best boxers in the world at 135 pounds, he was freed from prison in 2015 after being arrested on meth trafficking charges. Number 3 is Ben Askren. Ben Askren's funky moniker says everything about his time in the UFC. He joined the UFC through the first and only MMA exchange in promotion history, which was a peculiar method to get in. His following 3 bouts would go down in UFC annals, but not for the reasons he had hoped. In their first bout, he won through technical submission despite Robbie Lawler not being knocked out. His next opponent, Jorge Masvidal, was the man who knocked him out in the quickest knockout in UFC history, costing him his first fight. Finally, in the third fight of the run, he was defeated by Demian Maia in a bout that featured some of the worst striking moments in the history of the organization. At number 2, Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar, like his adversary BJ Penn, often changed weight classes. Although he came into the promotion as a strong lightweight champion, he would not remain at that weight for very long. After being dethroned, he switched weight classes and twice challenged for the featherweight championship. A year from now, in 2020, he'll compete as a bantamweight instead of a lightweight. It's absolutely crazy that Edgar, at age 40, is still a contender in the heavyweight division. And now, one of the top MMA fighters of the last decade, Frankie Edgar says he plans to call it quits after one more UFC fight this year. According to ESPN, Edgar has requested one more bantamweight bout from the UFC for an event scheduled for November at Madison Square Garden. The former lightweight champion will retire after the fight, win or lose. When asked who he thought would be the ideal opponent to end his career, Edgar, 24-10-1, offered Dominic Cruz, a former UFC and WEC bantamweight champion. At number 1, Mike Jackson. Mike Jackson has a 3-6 record as an amateur and no professional bouts, yet the UFC has signed him anyhow. His primary purpose in the promotion was to generate interest in Mickey Gall's upcoming match against CM Punk. Having lost to Gall, Jackson, a former WWE fighter, was eager for a rematch. They placed him up with Mike Jackson, another boxer with a winless record, since it would have been ridiculous not to. The incredibly unusual bout between them resulted in a unanimous decision for The Truth, but his victory was reversed when he tested positive for marijuana. In a rematch almost 4 years later, he knocked down Irish prospect Dean Barry with 2 groin punches and an eye poke, earning a disqualification victory. Jackson has been fighting in the UFC for 6 years and has a 1-1 record thus far. That's a wrap for this video. So, which of these UFC careers was the weirdest for you? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.